Before even recording this, I'm not sure if I'm fully capable of starting reviews on other pieces of media, like if I have the right equipment to do so and whatnot. But here I am, and let's get this started. As much as you want to hear what I have to say about the Digimon seasons, I do have to make a separate video that serves as an introduction to my relationship with the series and the origins of the digital worlds in Shareverse. I highly recommend watching this video first before any of my other seasonal reviews to get further context. But let's get into how I was first exposed to the series. I want to say I was roughly about 3 when I first heard about Digimon, but I was able to differentiate it from Pokemon based on the channels these shows were airing on. I think the first exposure was the Flash game on Jetix based on the movie where Agumon skates around the internet using the English theme playing on a loop. I also did watch one episode of Frontier when I was 4, but I'll get into that when we get into that season's review. While I was aware of both shows, I never really latched onto either of them. The only thing I knew about Digimon for a very long time was the first season had a girl with a pink hat, the third season was super dark, the fourth season had the characters become Digimon themselves, and nobody talks about the fifth season because it was quote-unquote bad. And that's how things were for almost a decade. But that perception quickly changed in 2012 from a highly unlikely source. The Nostalgia Critic. Please let me finish. Some of the storylines I wrote from 2011 and 2012 were somewhat inspired by movies Doug Walker reviewed during this time, and his review of the Digimon movie was one of them. This was one of the reviews on Channel Awesome that has never officially uploaded to YouTube, probably because it was one of the many Season 5 episodes that were a collab with other That Guy with the Glasses contributors, with the Digimon review being a crossover with Jesse Otaku. Full disclosure, I do not watch the Nostalgia Critic anymore. He's the Family Guy of internet reviewers. In fact, I unsubscribed to him literally 1 week before the Change the Channel document was released. I was tired of Doug and all of his antics. All of his jokes were low-hanging fruit that you could see from a mile away. There was the notorious skits. He constantly brings up Disney in all of his videos, especially Frozen. He always has to make Republican and conservative jokes in almost every other episode, which in my opinion is the bare minimum of comedy, saying Terminator Genesis is the worst movie in the franchise.
Enough!
Okay, but going back on topic. Ever since I saw his review on the Digimon movie, I grew curious on the series, if I was missing out on something. By that point, I was confident that Pokemon wasn't really my thing, therefore I wouldn't have a bias to its rival. However, there wasn't really a way for me to watch the anime, so I was the outsider looking in. Sound familiar? I found my opening in 2013, and since then I've never looked back, but I'll get into that next time. But enough about me, let's get into the creation of the digital world in Shareverse and how Evangelion plays into it. The biggest obstacle for me is how am I going to get Evangelion, a series that takes place in a semi-post-apocalyptic 2015, now placed in the real world in 1989. I had to do some adjustments in order for it to fit into Shareverse. The first impact can stay in its original time period where Lilith, part of the moon, crashing onto Earth, already inhabited by Adam. Who created them in Shareverse? God? Satan? Who knows? Perhaps it was the meteor sent by God that caused the flood and killed the dinosaurs. But again, who knows? As for the second impact, which eradicated half of Earth's population in 2000, yeah, that couldn't happen in 1974. This is where the introduction of computers and augmented reality comes into play, as the Japanese research team used this technology to research Adam and the Lance of Longitis, which was the real lance that was used during Jesus' crucifixion. God didn't like that and intervened, causing a large explosion on the research. This incident fascinated one Gendo Akari, and decided to research this topic alongside his wife Yui and his professor Fuyutsuki. This led into the Contact experiment in 1978, which killed Yui using a primitive VR machine to contact Adam, which didn't go so well. For the next 11 years, Gendo continued his research, leading into a plan to decipher the Dead Sea Scrolls in order to bring back Yui and complete instrumentality. However, these scrolls were blocked by data viruses when placed under the VR machine, and computers manifested into the angels that we're familiar with from the show. And with Nerve's current equipment, including different models of a computer avatar based off of Yui called Rei, was not capable of fighting the angels on her own. He then concluded that he needed younger souls who had experience in this field in order to complete his goal, that being his son Shinji, and later on a German named Oscar Linkley Shoryu. For the next few weeks, the two would go into VR machines and pilot their Avas, and alongside Rei, defeat the angels as Gendo gains another piece of the scrolls. It was only a matter of time before the Japanese government would interfere, using the counterforce Seele to spy on NERV. This included moles and their own computer programs in the form of Karu and the mass-produced Avas. Eventually, this reached a boiling point in the summer of 1989, where Seele raided NERV headquarters in Tokyo, as Gendo began the final steps of the ritual, now called the Third Impact. Instead of everybody turning into Fanta, the Data Angels began to materialize in the real world, but only for a few minutes. You'll see why. Meanwhile, in the VR room, Asuka was in total shock from getting killed by the MPEs and Shinji's AR machine, who held the soul of his mom. And yeah, if you saw End of Evangelion, you kinda know what happens in it. However, he was then saved by Rei, as she told him that he can create whatever life he wants to live, and how she was going to sacrifice herself in order to stop the Third Impact from continuing in the real world. She deleted the VR world that they all used, and thus deleted herself. Once Shinji came to, he began to strangle Asuka's comatose body, not sure what was real anymore, but was quickly stopped by the Tokyo police, realizing that there were the only two survivors of the headquarters. Both of them were sent to a hospital, and while Shinji was recovering, he began to take an interest in a book series that they had on deck. That being Digital Devil Story Megami Tensei. Immediately, Shinji began to draw connections of summoning demons using computers to what his father was trying to accomplish. Also, around this point, Shinji discovered the NERV building was under Gendo's name, and Shinji would own the settlement to it since it was in the family name. After he left the hospital, he went back to NERV's building, and he went to the Magi system, which was used to decipher and later materialize the data of the scrolls. With the knowledge he had on the books, he began to search for Rei's data and hoping that he could bring her back. After a short while, Rei was fully restored and could walk in the real world. While Asuka left the country to America, Shinji stayed in Tokyo and began to use a reformed Magi system to create a digital landscape. Unlike his father's desires, he would use it for the greater good, and thus the digital world was created, but he needed inhabitants for this world, and he could use Rei as a basis. The two planned on getting married, but Rei could not have any children. Using inspirations from Megami Tensei based off of anything and anything from mythological features to common everyday household appliances, Rei copied her data as the basis of the creation of digital monsters, or Digimon for short. So with everything ready in under a year, the Digital Worlds first opened their servers on April 8th, 1990. And I would like to address, while this was the date of my grandmother's death in 2020, it was 100% just a coincidence. I planned this date as the Digital World's activation back in 2015, years before she passed away. In fact, hours before she left us, I prayed and hoped to God she would pass on April 9th, in order to make things less awkward. But things just didn't turn out like that. I'm still keeping it as April 8th, because it will always stay with me. Well, that, and also it will require some rewrites in the Shareverse timeline if I did change the date. So that's basically the backstory of how the Digital Worlds was created, which leads into the first season I will be discussing, Digimon Fusion, which happens on the same day as its activation. I'll go over that in the next episode, so please subscribe for that, and subsequent reviews for other seasons. I promise you, you don't have to wait that long. With that, I'm AJ, and I'll see you all in the next one.